Hello, everybody. Today is Friday, August 9th. This is the AWS meeting. I think we are technically no longer a SIG. We are now a subproject of SIG Cloud Provider, but this is the SIG-ish AWS meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will be put on the internet. A reminder to be mindful of our code of conduct and be a good person. I pasted a link in the chat to our agenda. There are only 2 items on it right now, both of which I added, and they should be fairly quick. I think they're both fairly informational. And please do feel free to add items to the agenda. Please also feel free to add your name to the agenda. It's helpful for people watching the video at a later date to be able to contact you or something like that if they need to understand who you are or know who you are. Otherwise, I will dive right in. The first one is hopefully a very quick informational piece, which is that we did create the Cluster API Provider AWS accounts. So that came up a couple of weeks ago, and the Cluster API Provider AWS should now be being able to test under the CNCF account in sort of isolated AWS accounts. So previously, all the E2E testing was going through one account, and now there are 11 accounts, I guess, or at least 11. So that should help with tests that might otherwise step on each other's toes. I can move on to the next item unless anyone wants to say anything about that. The next item I think is more interesting for everyone. So a COPS user actually pointed out that they encountered an issue with the Kubernetes number of max or limit on the number of volumes you can attach to an instance. The Kubernetes scheduler enforces this limit based on sort of traditional limits that were basically constant across all instance types. I think it was 26 off the top of my head. On the newest AWS instance types, the limit is more dynamic. So if I recall correctly, you get 28 slots and NVMe instance volumes and ENIs and EBS volumes each count as one slot. And so this is particularly problematic if you have an instance which with, for example, I think the example given was 4 instance volumes where you're already down to 24 because 28 minus 4, which is so in other words, you can already attach less than the scheduler limit. And then in addition, if you're using the AWS VPC CNI provider, that attaches ENIs sort of dynamically. So you would then be even lower, as it were, and the true limit would be even lower and is no longer a constant. So that's particularly challenging. The workaround that I think people are playing with for now is basically to say, well, we can set the volume limit to something like 10 or something like that, and that sort of fits most of our use cases, but it will be problematic for people that are pushing it a little bit further, like either running with AWS VPC CNI and running a lot more pods, or trying to run more than workloads with volumes sort of at a denser rate than whatever cap they pick. So there are some links there to the Kubernetes issue, the COPS issue, and just a link to the AWS documentation that describes the details of this. I don't think we have any real answers on it right now, but I am trying to make people aware of it, and hopefully we will figure out. I think the first thing is to figure out where the right place is to solve this, because we don't have any great answers, I think, right now. It feels like it's probably going to be the scheduler, but there's going to have to be some difficult interactions, particularly with the idea of cloud provider extraction.
I have a question on that one, Justin.
Go for it.
So we were just kind of shooting ideas about the CNI and trying to avoid putting that static map of max CNIs that's kind of built into the CNI and how we could get around that. And one of the ideas was to add the instance limit for ENIs to the instance metadata. So we had a conversation or Mike had a conversation with the EC2 team, and they said it's actually quite easy to add stuff to the instance metadata. Do you think that that would at all be helpful for this volume use case if there was more information in the metadata?
I think that's a great change that you're proposing to expose that information. I think that maybe the harder bit is going to be figuring out how to plumb this information into the scheduler and having it be aware of the idea that it's now dynamic. I like the idea of putting it into metadata somewhere. We can also put it into Kubernetes metadata to and having it be dynamic without the scheduler having any. So currently the scheduler has, I don't think it has any cloud provider dependencies, but it is sort of aware of cloud provider information. It will be even such as the zone, for example. I don't think I don't think we want to add any more dependencies, but I like the idea of exposing metadata about this. So
that's another. So
yeah,
like with ENIs, another thing that sort of we've talked about is using a custom resource so that, because right now the current AWS CNI it sets max pods according to the instance type. So there's the scheduler custom resources allows you to, you could create an IP resource, right, and schedule according to that. It's kind of weird because the container actually has to have the resource and not the pod itself. So it's like I don't think there's such thing as pod level resources, even though IPs technically would be. But is that like I see what I see your point to, like the actual issue here is scheduling, not actually getting the data on the instance itself. But
I mean, getting the data is not great, but is work, but is probably a little easier than figuring out how to plumb it all through, I think. Because we can just sort of like code a map as we all have done. Again, it's okay. Right. But yeah, I like. So like, yeah, I like what
the custom resources thing. Is that something that is that the use case that custom resources is designed for?
I believe so. Yes, I think. So I think that would work well. I think the challenge is going to be. This is a resource. Well, I called it slots. I don't know if there's a better name, but like slots, this 28 slot thing, and the idea that like some NICs. Well, yeah, I mean, like some pods consume them and some pods don't consume a slot based on like whether they were the first one or not. It's a difficult accounting that I think is a little different from the way most of the other accounting works. So like it's not as simple as like you have 8 gig of memory and this one eats so much of it, right? Or you have a GPU.
Right.
It's a little weirder. But I do think that is likely the right mechanism. It's also, yes, I think that is likely the right mechanism. How we would actually achieve that, I don't know. Like, would we dynamically tweak the availability of? Would we forget about slots and just dynamically tweak the number of volume attachments, right? Or what would we do? There is a PR, or there's an enhancement for dynamic volume, which I think you pointed out, or someone pointed out in cloud provider meeting on Wednesday. That is, I'll put a link to the enhancement about that. I'm sort of still trying to dig into that and find out what's going on there. It doesn't look like it's an exact match. Or certainly not an exact match. It doesn't look like it. It looks like it looks like it doesn't really match the problem case, or our exact problem case. I just pasted that link in the minutes, and I'll put it in the chat actually, save everyone clicking back and forth. But yeah, Nick, if you wanna figure it out, that would be really helpful.
All right, sounds good.
Thank you. But yeah, I'm trying to. I'm guessing kubescheduler is going to have to be the first port of call for this. Scheduler is the one that enforces this limit, and yeah, I'm guessing hopefully we can get their attention on it and then get some input. But I wanted to make sure everyone in this group was aware of it from a Kubernetes not applying necessarily the correct limits on some instance types anymore. All right, well, I mean, that is the end of our agenda. I don't know if anyone else has anything else they would like to talk about.
I just had a quick question about the transition to provider AWS. In the last cloud provider meeting, there was some action items like changing the mailing list and stuff like that. Do we have the ability to do that? Or do you have the access to all that stuff?
I don't know. I can have a look. Yeah, I don't know. I can have a look. Yes, do you know what we need to do? What is there other than the, like, I hope the Slack channel has already been renamed. I haven't looked recently.
It was like 4 things. I know one of them was the mailing list. I can't recall the others.
Presumably calendar. We don't have access to I don't have access to the calendar, so that one we'll figure out. But yes, I guess the mailing list would be the first one because calendar and things like that are controlled by it. And I think docs came up, right? Like,
yeah.
Permissions on the docs. Like I know actually that okay, yeah, I will try to rename this stuff. I know that I know that Cops for whatever reason lost permissions on its docs. So I presume that was something to do with the rename, but it looks like I don't know whether people have tried editing the minutes. Oh yeah, Nick, you put your name in, so I'm guessing you still have access. That didn't break, so that's good. Oh, well, it's open, so all right, I'm going to change that. All right. I might make it can comment. That's probably a little safer. All right, so yes, it is possible that we will lose access to the, mailing list rename probably first. I'll try to rename the mailing list. I don't really know who owns the mailing list, but yeah, we can see. Do you know what the mailing list should be called?
I'm assuming provider AWS, but I'm not sure.
Okay, cool. I imagine then everyone will now have it will be annoyed because it will bypass all their spam filters, but that's okay. It's pretty low traffic anyway. All right, if there's nothing else, that is a short and sweet meeting. We can try to get this issue to scheduling. Use the time to try to get to scheduling's attention, and otherwise, I wish everyone a very happy 2 weeks, and thank you for coming. All right, bye.